Hey folks, and welcome to the first Straight Talk Whiskey Throwdown. Now this is going to be a monthly segment that we're going to do regularly now. That is a battle, basically, between two or more whiskeys. They can be any sorts, but they should sort of be similar in nature, because the idea behind these throwdowns, these battles, is basically a lot of people get asked, and I get asked a lot, and other reviewers too, and maybe you yourself, or you've asked somebody else, about, what's better? Do you prefer this over that? What's your favorite distillery? What's your favorite Irish whiskeys? Stuff like that. And you always get into, well, it depends on, are you talking about single pot stills? Are you talking about, single malt scotches? It depends on sort of the nuances in there. There's a lot of different varieties, so you could say, oh, well, maybe my favorite peated scotch is this, or something like that. But you can't put that on the same level as, say, an unpeated Highland single malt or something like that, or even a blend. So there's all these just different things to think about. So what I'm going to do is a monthly series on just picking two things that are pretty much in the same category for the most part. Yes, there's differences, but for the most part, you can review both of these and find some pretty distinguishing characteristics between the two. And so if you're at your local liquor store or something like that, and you're looking to see which one you may lean towards buying, or maybe you have both of them and you just want to hear somebody else's thoughts on it. That's what this is all about. So let's get right into it. So the Jameson Black Barrel, it is 40% ABV, as well as Bushmills Black Bush, 40% ABV. Now, in terms of the grains making it up, this is a mix of grain and single pot still. So you have the unmalted barley, malted barley, and grain that make this up. Now, this Bushmills is also a blend, but it leans a little bit heavier with malted barley. It's a little bit higher content in that. That's just sort of a staple of Bushmills sort of grain recipe going into it. So, but we have equal proof, so we're not sort of outdoing anyone there. Now, we'll just pour a little bit, let it sit in the glass just for a little bit. Presentation-wise, it's not really going to influence the score that we give, or if it has an edge over the other one. Oh, that was loud. But both, just for your knowledge, have nice little corks in it instead of the screw tops. So they'll just sort of sit these side by side and keep the bottles pretty lined up, because I don't want to mix up the two. So let's take a look at color. Pretty spot on the nose, just similar medium to light amber, a little bit of pale gold color. So not too much difference in that. So we still have stalemate thus far, which is good. So now what I'm going to do, and this is a little bit of a tip for those of you who might be doing this at home between some whiskeys that you have, is I'll start out with the Jameson just because, well, it's first on here. So when I go to nose it, obviously if I go right into Bushmills, I'm not really giving it its full due, because I've already smelled something. I still have those scents and aromas in my nose from Jameson, which could taint the actual experience of just solely the Bushmills Black Bush. So what I'm going to do is nose one, and this is actually a tip. If you smell the back of your hand, that's something, obviously our body is something that we inherently is just a neutral base for us, right? So do a little nosing, back of your hand, sort of get you to a level playing field, and then go in and try your other whiskey if that's what you're doing. So let's talk a little bit about what, so it's Black Barrel, Black Bush. Jameson is the only one that I know of out of these two whiskeys. I mean, I don't know that Bushmills does this, but Jameson gets their barrels charred not once, their ex-bourbon barrels, but twice. So I believe it's the Calvin Cooperage in Kentucky that does this. So Jameson is charring the barrels twice. So again, it's increasing, like I said in other reviews, it's increasing the amount of contact with spirit and wood. The charcoal helps certainly impart that process of the whiskey going in and out of the barrel as it expands and contracts and that sort of thing. So we do have a little bit of an edge here, but also take note that Jameson is aging the Black Barrel whiskey in ex-bourbon barrels. Now, Bushmills Black Bush, they say nothing about charring or toasting barrels more than they already are when they get the barrels from America, or whatever they're using it in. So, if we look at the label, it says matured in sherry cask. Well, they're not getting the sherry cask from America, so they're getting them from Spain. So the difference is that this is going to be aged in sherry cask. Don't know if it's charred once, more than once or anything like that. There usually is a little bit on some basic level, which gives it the charcoal, which, like I already said, what it does to, the expanding, contracting of the wood, and in essence, the spirit is moving in and out of that, pulling some of those notes from the sherry and also the wood itself. But also, it's sort of cleansing the palate, cleaning it up a little bit. That's why we use charcoal and a lot of water filters and things like that. So those are the very distinct differences. So yes, they are on slightly different levels, but they're pretty close. Price point, about $36 for this, about $33 for Bushmills. So not a huge difference. It's going to depend on where you're buying your juice. So there's that. Let's get into the nose here. First off, what I'm getting is this nice sweet vanilla, nice sweet honey, a little bit of caramel, definitely that toasted wood from the double charred bourbon barrels. A little hint of dried fruit in there, a little bit of almost like a dried cranberry note. But definitely a very bourbon cask influence on the aroma here with the Black Barrel. So, sort of get a basis, like I said before. Now we'll get into Bushmills Black Bush. Definitely different. What I'm getting here is definitely the sherry cask, but a little bit more than that. So it's more about these lighter, sweet, honeyed notes, fresh cut grass, but the sherry influence is definitely there. So you're getting these really ripe, almost overripe fruits in there. And almost strangely enough, is it's got a little bit of an orange, a little orange peel, zestiness, very vibrant, very not flavorful, I can't taste it, but very active orange sense to that. So very different here on the nose. And it's really hard to determine which one is sort of more substantial than the next. Because on the one hand, you have this beautiful sort of bouquet of these ex-bourbon barrels that are just really adding a lot to this whiskey, especially being toasted or charred twice. And I think they have a video on Jameson's website if you want to look at that. It's pretty interesting process. So there's that. So let's make a little note here on the side. I think has the edge, which I don't want you to see yet, because that would be rude to give it up before the game is over. So, going back to neutral again, because a lot of the things that we taste are heavily influenced by what we smell. So, there's a reason for sort of getting that neutral scent in our nose back to a level base. So, Jameson Black Barrel. Definitely carrying through with the bourbon barrel influence. What you're getting is something very rich in wood tannins, a lot of vanilla underlining it. I'm not getting a lot of the deep, like, cinnamon, brown sugar, nutmeg, that sort of thing that you get with a bourbon and things like that, because it's sort of the triple distilled spirit that's in, that makes up the whiskey, that is sort of balancing that out a little bit. But with the double charring, you're getting a lot of those ex-bourbon cask notes. We'll say, though, as you continue, that the bourbon cask influence sort of levels out a little bit. So you get little hints of it on the initial, or the second sip, rather. And what evolves from that is more of the fruitier flavors, but they're very subdued. Again, it's 80 proof. It's nothing too punchy. There's no big alcohol kick or anything like that. Don't get me wrong, it's very flavorful, but if we talk about finish, it's very, very fleeting, it's very quick. It's not a clean finish, so you do have sort of a muted, these notes of sort of, let's say, dried nuts, that sort of thing, a little bit of dark fruits, but just sort of this bitter aftertaste in there. And again, it's not unpleasant. It's not a crisp, clean finish like maybe a Bush or Jameson original is. So still some of those lingering notes. Take one last pass at it, and then we'll move on to the Black Bush. So, other than what I've said before, you still get some of the spices in there. Really spry, peppery, which is pretty typical with Jameson if you've ever noticed that in there. Is you get a little bit of a pepper spice to it, but also carrying through some of the caramel, really, from these bourbon barrels. It's just sort of a sweet. It's got a little bit of a texture to it. Nothing much. Like I said, the finish is pretty viscous. It goes pretty quick. Not clean, but subdued. So there we have that. Now, in terms of, obviously you want water to clean your palate out and sort of get you back to basics. You don't want freezing cold water because it's going to numb some of the flavors in cognates in there. So you want to make sure that it's sort of at room temperature, and it's the same with ice. If you put ice in there, it's not a problem that you're doing that. It's just you have more of a tendency of the really chilled temperature to numb some of those things. But again, it's all personal preference. But you could get really technical, and you could be like, well, hard water over soft water, Brita, filtered, tap water, that sort of thing. For our intents and purposes, it doesn't really matter. Just get yourself back to a sort of level playing field. I'm not trying to be too bougie about it. So, Bushmills Black Bush. What I love about the Bushmills Black Bush is you get this very strong current of honey in there. Almost a honey that has been sort of seared with this nice raisiny, sherry, fruity note. It's just wonderful. It's just a gentle stream that sort of pushes through there steadily. But it's definitely taking some big influence, like the Jameson Black Barrel does with its former contents of the cask, of the bourbon cask. The sherry in the cask that age Bushmills Black Bush, a lot of their other variations, is definitely a strong driving force in this, which is equally as nice. While there is a sherry and honey note, you're still getting these nice vanilla, creamy notes. The high malt character that, you know, the high malted barley that makes up the spirit is definitely coming through. You're getting something that's more creamy, fresh baked biscuits, that sort of thing. A real earthy sense to it, underlying the honey and sherry notes in it. Now, unlike the Jameson, the Bushmills tends to stay pretty even as you continue, you know, in sipping it. You don't really lose anything out. The experience kind of repeats itself. Whereas with the Jameson, it sort of starts on top. Your first pass at it is really substantial and great, and the next set is sort of just comes down just a little bit to a level playing field and then carries off like that. With Bushmills Black Bush, you start up here and you just keep going across with a little bit of fall off, but nothing too substantial. So for my money, I'm going to declare that Bushmills Black Bush is the winner of this round. So that is our first Straight Talk Whiskey Throwdown, and it's the Bushmills Black Bush that's the winner. If you have these two bottles, please go ahead and do sort of a battle of your own and let me know what you think. Let me know what you come out with. So there you have it. That's number one. We'll be back with you on the weekend to give you episode 52 or 53. One of those. Either way, it'll be a good whiskey review. We look forward to seeing you then. Have a good rest of the week, and see you next time.